Our scripture reading today comes to us from the book of Amos, in the first section of the Bible that is commonly called the Old Testament. It's the Hebrew scriptures of our Bible. Amos was called a prophet, although Amos himself denied the claim. He rather called himself a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore trees, because more often than not, in Amos's day, prophets were only telling leaders what leaders want to hear. Aren't you glad we don't live in times where people only listen to what they want to hear? But despite what you may have been told on Christian television shows or by a Christian evangelist, prophets are not predictors of future events, but rather they saw God's actions in the midst of their lives and in the times of their lives. And the time we're at is in the era and reign of King Jeroboam. And often they try to remind both kings and people of God's promises, the story of the Exodus, and what God was up to in a time of national crisis. Now, they are often called major or minor prophets, but this is just to tell the difference between long writings and short writings, rather than the quality of the material or how important what he said was. Amos was preaching to the northern kingdom of Israel about 750 years before Jesus, and is among the oldest writings of a prophet recorded in our Old Testament. The books are in roughly size order rather than chronological. So it's between Joel and Obadiah, which, by the way, if you read Obadiah, the one chapter wonder that it is, Obadiah, you would have read an entire book of the Old Testament today. You will find the first reading on page 851 in the Pew Bible, or you can access the reading on our guest internet or smartphone tablet. From Amos chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because they sell the righteous for silver, and the needy for a pair of sandals. They who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth and push the afflicted out of the way. Father and son go into the same girl, so that my holy name is profaned. They lay themselves down beside every altar on garments taken in pledge. And in the house of their God they drank wines bought with fines they imposed. Second reading is found on page 854. From Amos chapter 5, verses 21 through 27. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Did you bring to me sacrifices and offerings the 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You shall take up with Sakuth, your king, or Kawan, your star god, your images that you made for yourselves. Therefore, I will take you into exile beyond Damascus, says the Lord, whose name is the God of hosts. Blessings on this reading of Holy Scripture this morning. When I'm not doing my duties as pastor of the best disciples congregation in Decatur, Illinois, I wear other hats within the community, and I am president of the board of directors for Dove Incorporated. Now, Dove has just passed its 49th anniversary this month. On July the 7th, 1970, Prairie Avenue, along with 6 other disciples churches, got together to address needs in the community. And as president of the board of directors, I get to do very presidential things. I get to take credit for things I had nothing to do with. But I also get criticized for stuff I had nothing to say upon. And it is astounding to me that a budget that started at merely $15,000 a year in 1970 with one employee, Ray Batman, has expanded to over $3 million this coming year alone. And Dove Incorporated is working hard with people struggling in life and encountering people in desperate times and in desperate places. The threat of domestic violence or the actions of domestic violence. The issue of homelessness or near homelessness. Even the value of a retiree who simply needs to get out of the house and volunteer somewhere so that he or she feel a part of the community that now is closing in and becoming more and more isolated. Oftentimes, what I encounter when I'm called upon about a matter involving clients at Dove Incorporated is oftentimes they believe that I can do something about some rules that have been put upon clients as they seek the services of Dove Incorporated. They get confused between the different types of boards that Dove operates under. We do policy procedures. There are boards for just homeward bound, for just domestic violence, that deal with the day-to-day. But lots of times, can't you do something about the rules? Oftentimes the rules and the policies are there to protect not only the client, but to protect the staff. I know many times you probably wonder about the factual accuracy of cardboard signs posted on corners with people standing. And I can tell you over and over again, do not believe a word that cardboard sign says. In a city such as ours, with so many social service programs and services available, why are they standing on the corner? Well, it's very simple. More often than not, they refuse to follow the rules. It's easy to follow the rules when it doesn't bother you about the rules. Eric Ilms' book, Phoenix Affirmations, we're going through on this 12-week journey, talks about a situation that he encountered as a pastor, and oftentimes I too encounter similar circumstances. More often than not, people come to me as their last hope, their last sense of direction. And Eric had met a widow by the name of Verna in the congregation, attended services in Phoenix, Arizona regularly, went out to dinner and danced a few evenings, but was a widow. And while she was conversing with Eric, she revealed an embarrassing situation for herself. She found herself in incredible credit card debt. Now, how this credit card debt came to be was very simple. Her husband and her had a business for over 30 years, and the business fell on hard times. And unfortunately, after the business had to be closed, then her husband's health failed. And for that last year of her husband's life, him and Verna were just getting by on the credit cards. For 3 to 7 months. Well, as Eric thought, okay, wait, how much are we talking about? She's now getting phone calls 3 to 7 times a day about debt collectors hounding over her debts, her bills. And she's not eating 3 meals a day. She's skipping meals to get by. But she doesn't want to use the church food pantry, and she doesn't want charity. Talking to Verna a little bit more, Eric discovers the amount he was perfectly expecting with medical costs and all the other expenses of living, that it had to be $50,000 or more. But it wasn't. Much to Eric's relief, it was just around $10,000 credit card. Eric thought to himself that this is great, actually. All you need to do, Verna, is just get a part-time job. Maybe something in retail. Maybe, just a few hours a day, a couple days a week, and you can get rid of your debt collectors. You don't have to declare personal bankruptcy like you think you do. Just start getting out there. Verna was a little concerned about this. She hadn't worked for anyone other than her husband for a number of years, but she was willing. Eric was gone a few days and came back and asked Verna how the job search was going. And she had applied at all the retail stores in the Scottsdale, Arizona area, all the ones that had help wanted, and told about how they received her and how they really thought she was a great candidate for their job. But then she would get the rejection letter. She'd get the rejection phone call. Because you see, what Verna wasn't aware of in the job market was that all entry-level jobs required a credit background check. Her credit was lousy. But her credit wasn't around charging 3 cars and living a lifestyle of caviar and lobster all the time. It was medical expenses and life expenses. But for even entry-level jobs, the rules say you can't get work. It's so easy to tell the unemployed to get a job without ever knowing the requirements to even get an entry-level job. You see, Verna wasn't looking to be a cash register person. She's going to sort jeans at the Walmart. She's going to hang clothes. She's going to sort inventory. But the rules say, corporate says, you cannot work. The very thing the unemployed need is withheld because of policy. The rules work for most people, but not for all people. And that's where we find ourselves here in the prophet of Amos. This is the story that we're coming into when we hear the words of Amos. The people of the northern kingdom, the land of Israel, have had a remarkable experience here. They have had success a little bit with foreign policy. They've invaded weaker countries and have expanded both their economic and political power, and suddenly have found themselves with unexpected wealth, wealth that has not been seen in the land of Israel in decades. But the most favored economic benefits and status and political fortunes aren't going to everybody in Israel. They're going to few. King Jeroboam is making making Israel great again. But Amos is sent to Jeroboam to say that God's disfavor is with those who are favored of the few at the expense of the many. Corporate welfare for the few. Entry-level employment checks for the many. Now, to understand this Hebrew passage a little better, we need to understand what's going on in the text as well as some Jewish traditions here. First of all, the phrase they gathered, they sell righteousness for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. Now, first of all, we're encountering what is common in Hebrew poetry, that they put things side by side but not next to each other here. So the righteous is supposed to be with the needy, and the silver is supposed to be with the sandals. So in other words, the righteous needy are being sold for just silver or sandals. Now, it's interesting that this phrase would be being sold for silver, because this is only just a short phrase that means they're being sold at whatever the market says. At the market rate, whatever the status quo is, that is satisfactory. They're not being sold at the rate of shoes, despite how we would see it in the text. But rather just good people are just doing what the rules say, just doing what the socio-economically agreeable status quo is. Nothing more, nothing harmful here, just doing it all. The mention of sandals is interesting here, because sandals are used in contracts in Israel. To make sure a contract is legal, you give someone your shoe. Here you go, Don, have a shoe. Now, obviously in a legal contract with the shoe being off, and the fact that, remember, there's no sidewalks, and believe me, even if there are sidewalks, yesterday's heat, you're baking your feet off. Mm-hmm. You have a real incentive to hopefully abide by the contract. Because if you said, oh, well, there's no contract, I didn't have a contract with Don at all. All Don has to do is go to court and present the shoe, saying, yes, you did, you signed it. It's legit, you can't deny it. Now, there's also a similar deal here about cloaks. People are being sold for cloaks, because we have to remember that this is not the days of department stores. This is the days of maybe 2 outfits in your life that you constantly have. Something to cover over and something to cover over that. And when you give your cloak, there's a real good draw of trying to get that cloak back, because Israelite nights get really cold. And you better pay that loan back, or otherwise you're going to sleep that night with no blanket, no covering for it. Now, God is angry in Amos, not because of people being evil. God is angry that well-behaved Israelites are taking advantage of the poor and the disadvantaged at market rates and using legal means to do it. have you noticed that payday lenders aren't in Forsyth or Mount Zion? And at one time in Pookie Park alone, there were 5 of them. Now you will say, oh, those are risky people. Half of personal bankruptcies in America are caused not from profligate spending on things they don't need. Half of personal bankruptcy in America is illness. Half of those had insurance from their employer until the health care got so catastrophic that the company dropped it. All of this, my friends, is legal corporate welfare. Half of the personal bankruptcies in America had homes. Half of the bankruptcies in America had a college degree. Half. And it's still legal. Because, after all, most of humanity's worst crimes aren't caused by evil people. Most of humanity's worst crimes are legal. And most of the crimes today are legal ones. Now, you might think that the Israelites must be, not even listening to their sermons, not even listening to their pastors, not even attending church. That they're just blindly going however they want to go with the market rate. You'd be wrong. For that second reading in our Amos reading today says it all. They were mailing out Christmas cards. They were screaming at clerks who didn't say Merry Christmas. They were giving to the church when they attended. They were giving their tithes. They were doing everything that they were supposed to do. And God says, your worship services disgust me. You can go through all the emotions you want. You can go through and write the Christmas cards you want, but there's no justice in Israel. There's no righteousness in Israel. You can play the religious card. But God will not be fooled. You discover this when you read all of Amos, which is only about 9 chapters. So what God is criticizing is you can play the game, but you're not fooling anyone. The more you are happy with the way things are and that you believe that payday lending people deserve to have those loans, the more God is not happy. Because it's not about whether we print "In God We Trust" on our money or on our license plates. It's about the mercy to those who cannot find hope in a world that refuses employment. Because the policy of corporate says, bad credit history we do not hire. Amos reminds us that God does not judge the greatness of the country by the number of millionaires, the number of palaces, the number of billionaires, the stock value. It doesn't matter, but rather how the least are cared for. The greatness of the nation isn't measured by Christmas Eve services or Easter or nativities on the public square. It's measured by how much righteousness is expanded to those who can never grab it, how much mercy is given to those who really need it. That is success in Israel's eyes, in Amos's eyes. I wish I could tell you how the story ended. Because when we measure how well the corporate, and in this sense, corporate meaning corpus, meaning life-giving. People who pray, give us this day our daily bread. We're not talking about give us our next Lexus. We're talking about giving what is needed to survive. And when you're going to argue about giving other people what they need to survive, maybe Merry Christmas is not as important as your billionaire overlord is making sure it is. Because companies who take seriously the well-being of their employees also tend to keep them. Isn't that interesting? Churches who take care of the least of these tend to keep them. And churches shouldn't be embracing stockholders as much as they should be embracing the common stock people. When there's a widow in Decatur who can't get a job because her credit history's a wreck, why do we not look at the rule again? She's not going to be a cashier. We're not asking for her to be a bank teller. She can work a shift. That fabulous, controversial phrase, minimum wage. She could gain her life back. But only mercy, righteousness flows freely rather than the bottom line of corporate policy. For the truth of the matter is with God that the least of these is the most important to God. And if we're going to stand with God where God stands, we must stand with them first. Corporate welfare shouldn't benefit the stockholding class. Corporate welfare should change the world. Amen.